Hello, I'm James Rick, and welcome to the Full Potential Show, your #1 non-boring source for personal development. And today we're going to talk more about how to create more wealth in your life. And there were two key things that we talked about in the last episode for doing this. One was to live a frugal lifestyle, waste not. And the second was to actually get a return on investment, leverage yourself so that the least amount of effort generates the most amount of return. So today we're going to zero in and talk more about how to live a frugal lifestyle and have fun doing it. Because a lot of times when you think about wasting not or living below your means, you might think, I've got to live like a cheap ass. I need to be a hermit, living in a cave somewhere, not really exercising any of the luxuries that my friends or family enjoy. And they're going to look down on me because I'm living below my means. Oh, there's the cardboard box neighbor that we have known as our son. No, you don't have to live below your means, and you don't have to really live like a poor person in order to live a frugal lifestyle. In fact, the way your memory works is it remembers peak experiences and it remembers low experiences. And so really the key to having fun and doing the frugal lifestyle is to live a conservative lifestyle, but then splurge once in a while. And guess what? When you look back on your life, you're gonna remember all these great times. Your life's gonna seem very exciting, even though you're conserving your resources, especially for the long term, which is what living frugal is all about. There's a quote by Samuel Johnson that says, if everyone were to live frugally, more people would be wealthy and there would be less poverty in the world. So yes, some people may not have an option, in the beginning especially, but man, especially if you're struggling right now or you're trying to make ends meet, you gotta find ways to cut down on your lifestyle and still splurge once in a while so you don't feel like you're just living to die. You've gotta have some fun in your life too. So we're gonna talk about ways to do that in this episode. And in the next episode, now that you've got some of your army, remember we talked about capital, or the money that you save is turning into capital, which is your resource for leverage, your power to start applying effort, in the form of capital instead of hard labor and your hours and your time. So you're conserving resources, you're going to have more capital so that you can start applying leverage and generating more returns and more capital and a bigger army, and pretty soon you're taking over the world. So that's what being frugal is all about. We're gonna take over the world once we're real frugal, right? So in this episode, I wanna talk about your housing, your transportation, and your basic living, such as food, and then also how do you get stuff and how do you still maintain this frugality? So let's talk about the house for a minute. So many people invest in the most that their credit can possibly allow them, and that's what got this economy and this whole mess in the first place. People getting more than they possibly could, leveraging debt to buy stuff that is not truly assets, stuff that's just turned toxic, right? Literally, they call it a toxic asset right now. It is not an asset. A true asset is something that puts money in your pocket. Okay, remember that. So anything that's taking money out of your pocket is toxic. It's something to avoid. And I say avoid debt like the plague. Unless you know that debt is going to immediately provide a return on investment that's guaranteed, avoid it like the plague. And interest that's working against you is the enemy. So if we're going to set a battle line, the first battle line that we're going to set is you against debt and interest. Now, if you don't have any debt or interest, you're in great shape. You can just skip this part of it. But if you are in debt and you do have interest working against you right now, you're gonna have to just tackle this battle line, okay? And that means you're gonna have to find ways to get out of debt and get rid of that interest. And you're probably saying to yourself right now, duh, that's what I've been trying to do. Well, in order to do it, you're gonna have to look into some other areas, and we're gonna talk about that. So let's say your house. Let's say you do have a house, and let's say you have debt right now. I want you to look around your house and say, is this house absolutely necessary? Because there's going to be two key things I really want to drill into your brain, and that is, one, there's a huge difference between necessary and nice to have expenses, and that's really the key to living a frugal lifestyle, knowing the difference between a nice to have, easily justifiable, but unnecessary expense versus necessary. How do you know what's necessary? Necessary is the minimum necessary in order to survive, both in your personal life and your business. And necessary is also any investment that you know has a pretty good chance of producing a return. And necessary is also an investment that you've researched is highly unlikely to lose money. Okay, so necessary, defining necessary versus nice to have. It's such a critical point. I can tell you so many people that go through business school and years of studying how to do a business fail at that point because they think it's necessary to have everything structured in the beginning. It's necessary to have a nice office, to have a nice desk, to have nice tools and everything else. So by the time they get all what they think is necessary, but it was just nice to have stuff out of the way, they've actually gone out of business. They failed at the number one objective, which is to survive. So necessary is whatever it takes in order to survive, and I want you to just get clear on what that baseline actually looks like, because before this, you might have said, well, it's nice to have this house. It's nice to have the car that I have. It's nice to have these things. And you're not willing to give those up, but when you really start to drill down and say, what is necessary in order to survive, you say, well, I guess I was living a little higher than I needed to in the beginning. And it's so important. You only need to sacrifice in the beginning. In fact, your lifestyle, if you looked at it on like a timeline, it may need to take a dip in the beginning, but that dip is so critical because it's going to allow you to preserve your capital so you can finally start getting some leverage. And once you break through the clouds, it's like they say, the first million's the hardest. Once you break through the clouds, you're going to have the resources to continue to keep on going, and then you can turn around and start getting some of the nicer to have stuff. But it's when you try to leverage in the beginning and all that debt and interest is working against you that you really hurt yourself. So let's go back to the house, which is one of the biggest investments that somebody can make. And it's not really an investment if you're buying something that you cannot afford and you have no guaranteed returns. If you think that you're going to get a return and you're hoping that the price of your house goes up, that's speculating. And the odds of losing money are high when you're speculating. You can do speculating later when you have more money that you can possibly risk. But in the beginning, it's so important that we're only investing in the things that are necessary and we know have a high chance of return. So let's start there. Here's how you got to look at your house situation, whether you're in debt or you're not. Start with the minimum. I mean, if you can just get into a place, like if all you are is one person, all you need is like one bedroom or even a studio. Start with something small and then pay that baby off so that you don't have interest working against you. And then if you do want to get into something bigger, all the money that you would have paid towards a mortgage for 30 years, which winds up being 3 times as expensive as what you actually bought when you factor all the interest in. Let's say you buy a $200,000 house. By the end of a 30-year loan, it's like $600,000. But guess what? If you get into, say, a $50,000, hole in the ground, like a condo or something nice, say you get into something half as much, you can pay that baby off if you're stacking your payments over the next, say, couple of years. And by the end of, say, a 30-year period, you could have bought 10 condos. By the end of 30 years, you could either have one if interest is working against you and you've got one paid off that you paid $600,000 for, or you've got 10 because you've also got compound interest working for you. As you pay off one, you were able to rent it out and get another one, and that's all returning. So in the end, you actually get even more than the $600,000 because you've got compound interest, which is something we'll talk about in other episodes. If you've never heard of compound interest, it's what Einstein said is the most powerful force in the universe.